The Pac-12 just got some financial news, and yeah, they need a couple things to really go their way.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, all that and more every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, which is why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. We'll check in on Tuscaloosa as spring football gets started for Alabama under new head coach Kalen DeBoer, and conference championship races. Some fascinating notes in the Big 12 and the ACC coming up on today's show. But we start with the financial news that came down because of all of this reshuffling. So the college football playoff is going to expand, and the Big 10 and the SEC are going to get 58% of the revenue. The Big 12 and the ACC are going to get less than that amount, so they will continue to be put at a financial disadvantage. And then the group of 5 schools are getting $1.8 million per school. Now, a playoff share over the years has been around $6 million. And so the group of 5, and that's for the power conference schools. Remember, the Pac-12 doesn't technically not exist yet. For all intents purposes, it does. But remember, it's going to be rebuilt, right? There are all of these conversations and narratives about, well, it's the last this of the Pac-12, last this. Really, the narrative should be it's the last blank of the Pac-12 as we know it. Because as I have repeated several times here on the show, and as the evidence continues to bear itself out, the Pac-12 is going to rebuild. And so Oregon State and Washington State are getting 1/5 of the amount of money that the group of 5 schools are getting. Does that make any sense? Not particularly, unless Oregon State and Washington State are agreeing to this framework with Washington State President Kirk Schultz because they know that it is only going to be for 2 years and they're going to be able to make up that money in other ways. So, interestingly enough, this is a college football podcast. Allow me to bring college basketball into the fold. The Pac-12 has got 4 teams. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because Oregon won the Pac-12 tournament. Colorado is a first 4 team. Arizona and Washington State are automatic bid teams. That's a couple $1 million right there. And if those teams win and advance, that's going to make more millions of dollars. And those units, remember, get paid out. They kind of get carried over the course of time. So every game that is won by any of those teams in the NCAA tournament will go to be split between Washington State and Oregon State. So for a 2-year arrangement that they have with the WCC, that they'll probably have with the Mountain West for scheduling football games, to make up this gap where they're making 1/5 of $1.8 million that the group of 5 schools are getting, they're looking for other ways to make up that revenue. And the 10 departing schools with Oregon State and Washington State negotiated a settlement to give the Beavs and the Cougs a $255 million war chest. Now, that money can be used basically however those 2 universities see fit. It can be used to fund their athletic department. It can be used to, help cover some costs here or there, which is where this might come into play a little bit, And I think that what has to be highlighted with that money is, yes, it is a lot for 2 schools to have, but they're taking a hit from what the revenues would have been had the Pac-12 stayed together of tens of millions of dollars. And so you can bankroll yourself for several years, but not infinitely. And yeah, you look at this and say, wow, that's going to be a couple $1 million they'll lose compared to the group of 5. But if the Pac-12 schools, win some games this year, suddenly money is going to come their way, and they may be able to have the same amount or close to it at the very least, so that they don't have to run their athletic departments at a massive deficit, or a lot of athletic departments run at a deficit, but they don't have to have as big of a gap compared to the other schools that they are trying to compete with here. But I think Oregon State and Washington State would only take this deal and sign on to it and agree to it if they knew we're going to be fine for a couple of years. And then once we rebuild the Pac-12 into the premier Group of 5 conference in the entire country, that is, of course, going to be seen as a G5 payout, which will be back to the $1.8 million, which is, of course, still less than what they should be able to get being a part of a power conference. But they have to make the best of a bad situation here. And that is to build the Pac-12 back up with, I think, the best of the Mountain West and the best of the American Conference as well. So that's where things currently stand. That news came down over the weekend and is just reinforcing for, the 7th time or however many pieces of evidence I've talked about here on the show that this league is going to rebuild. It's a matter of how and not when. And everything exists in this 2-year window, right? In 2 years, the Mountain West media rights deal with CBS and Fox expires. And yes, even in a couple years, there would be fees if Oregon State and Washington State were to bring teams over, but not everybody from the Mountain West. There would be the standard exit fee, and then there'd be a fee on top of that. And then that's when you go back to the $255 million war chest. But other things have to be considered there. There's a debt to Comcast. How does that get paid out? How much do the departing 10 schools owe? Because that was taking place while they were still in the league. You've got a lawsuit from the Holiday Bowl. You've got, sunk costs here and there. Perhaps I don't even know at this point. Like, it's hard to keep track of everything, but there are ways in which that money is going to be spent. I think the question is how much, how long is that going to, hold them over? How well will it hold them over? Because both schools, while expressing their disappointment in, the playoffs decision to say, yeah, you're getting, a fifth of a G5 over there, which doesn't even make any sense. I don't think that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. Like, if Oregon State and Washington State are playing, as independents, but they've got this arrangement with the Mountain West, why would they not be, just because they're not officially a part of the Mountain West? I mean, if you're paying based on what a school is getting as it contributes to all of this stuff, Oregon State and Washington State are now a part of that particular league. So that doesn't seem right to me, but I don't think Oregon State and Washington State are going to be overly concerned about it, because I think temporarily in the short term, they're going to be able to keep their athletic department funded at a way that it would have been had they gotten the full $1.8 million, because of the NCAA tournament units, because of the war chest, and their stated commitment to continuing to fund their athletics at the highest level possible. So that's where they stand. NCAA tournament wins, certainly good news for the Beavs and the Cougs. If, Colorado makes a run, or if Wazoo, goes all the way to the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, that's money that comes in to the Pac-12, which still exists as a legal entity, dead in your eyes, dead in my eyes as we know it, but still legally alive. It's still there. And there are a lot of questions to be answered. And I think they're kind of in wait and see mode before they make their first really big move as to what they could do to rebuild the conference. I think they're probably waiting to see what happens with Florida State and what sort of dominoes that could cause to fall. Lots of dominoes in Tuscaloosa. Why? Well, it's Alabama, of course. And what happens at Alabama affects the rest of college football, because teams want to challenge Alabama for playoff spots. So what's going on now that spring football is underway? We'll check in with a Crimson Tide. After we check in with our friends at Nissan. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Houston Cougars are the Nissan Armada, top-seeded team, as hardcore as it gets. No wonder they're expected to land a top seed, and did in the NCAA tournament after their first year in the Big 12. The Vols of Tennessee are the Nissan Pathfinder. Thrilling to watch. They've created a lane for themselves, getting the top spot in the SEC. Dalton Knecht is a Player of the Year candidate who's carried them and made them a team to watch. They've got St. Peter's in the first round. Careful. The Utah State Aggies are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised everyone with a powerful performance against New Mexico, giving them their first outright Mountain West title in program history. Speaking of the Lobos, how about their Mountain West tournament win to get themselves an 11 seed in the tournament against Clemson? Go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Aggies and the Lobos have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop at nissanusa.com. This episode of Locked On College Football also brought to you by our friends at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, it's March Madness week, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. They recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, Major League Baseball, and more, plus news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Let's get an update in Tuscaloosa, shall we? Luke Robinson, Locked On Alabama, joining me here on the show. Luke, as Alabama begins spring football under their new head coach, Kalen DeBoer, what's their biggest priority?
I think the biggest priority, and look, this is so obvious and cliche, but I think it's going to be to try and get Jalen Milroe improved as a passer, more polished. He already has a great and deadly deep ball, and I think that his running game, his personally and Alabama's overall, is very good. He's just going to have to get a little bit more accurate and better with his decision making, especially when it comes to intermediate and short passes. And if that can get shored up, then I think Alabama will be in great shape.
Outside of Milroe, who we'll get back to in just a moment, what else are you looking for in spring football, reports, information, and everything of the sort? Where should Kalen DeBoer have his teeth really, really sunk in for this Alabama team?
Again, I think the obvious answer is offensive line. I mean, Alabama lost some big names from the offensive line, like a J.C. Latham, like a Seth McLaughlin, who transferred to Ohio State. Some people may view that as a positive. I personally don't. I mean, I think there was a reason he was starting every single game. But I think the offensive line does need to get better. We'll see some new faces there, and they'll probably have a new attitude, but they'll be coached by a coach that knows how to coach offensive line very, very well. So I feel like the offensive line is certainly crucial. Another place for me is going to be receiver. Alabama didn't really seem to have the it guy last year after all this time of being spoiled by the likes of Calvin Ridley and Jerry Jeudy and Devontae Smith. I mean,
go back to Julio Jones. I mean, it's been a long run. It's been a long run of successful wide receivers out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because growing up as an Alabama fan, I didn't get to see a ton of wide receivers that were uber successful, especially not in the NFL. But like all these guys have done it and done it well. Amari Cooper's still going strong in the NFL. Julio Jones is probably going to hang it up this year. But, I mean, he had a nice, fruitful career, probably going to end up in a gold jacket. And then the other guys I mentioned, they're all doing really well. Jerry Jeudy, ironically, just got traded to the Browns. But I want to see somebody else step up. Obviously, Isaiah Bond last year had some memorable moments, specifically the Gravedigger play call in the Iron Bowl. But really, I think there was people expected even a little bit more out of him. I think he's a great wide receiver, but he certainly wasn't the caliber of those other guys I mentioned. So is somebody like a Kobe Prentice going to be able to do something to step up to the next level? Is somebody like Caleb Odom, who's coming in that everybody thought was going to be a tight end? Well, it looks like he's going to be more like a huge wide receiver. Is he going to be able to come in and make some serious noise? So receiver for me is something that I'm really looking forward to in terms of somebody stepping up.
Yeah, I think Milroe is a capable quarterback. As you mentioned, he's definitely got some room for improvement. But if you have good weapons around you, everybody knows in college or the NFL, that, of course, is a huge advantage, especially for a young quarterback that has just the 1 year of starting experience under his belt. And it wasn't even a full year, right? It was a little bit choppy. He didn't get the starting job until a little bit, into the season. Of course, he played it out and is the clear-cut starter for Alabama going into this year. But He's got an offensive coordinator who 2 months ago at this time would not have been his offensive coordinator because there was a coaching change there. And Coach Huff along the offensive line and Coach Grubb as the OC left Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide before ever calling a play, or I don't even know if they ever even contacted recruits in that capacity. They went to the Seahawks to be a part of Coach McDonald's staff up there, which as a Seahawks fan, I personally am rather happy about. The in-house promotion of Coach Sheridan to the offensive coordinator position. How is that being received amongst Alabama fans, and how should it be received?
Honestly, in terms of how it's being received, I think everybody is being very patient. It's not like us as Alabama fans to be incredibly patient. But we are taking a very wait-and-see approach to this whole new staff. If you ask me, now, of course, there are fringes that are saying Alabama won't skip a beat, and the other side is Alabama is doomed and the ship is sinking. I understand. But I think everybody is being cautiously optimistic. I mean, Kalen DeBoer has done a great job at Washington. He's done a great job everywhere he's been, but he's never been in the SEC. And I know some people don't like to hear it. The SEC is the best. That's where the best are. It's where the best athletes are, the best competition every single week, the hardest places to play on the whole are in the SEC. So it's going to be different. And his first SEC game is going to be taking on Georgia at home after an off week. But the week before that off week, you play at Wisconsin. So he's got a lot to do. It's going to be difficult. And I think everybody's like, okay, let's see what happens. Now, when the season gets closer, most Alabama fans are going to be like, I think we'll be fine. 10-2 is a floor kind of thing. I don't know. I think the floor could be more like 9-3, 8-4, but I'm more likely to predict something like a 10-2 because again, I think the players are there. I think the staff is good. I believe in them as much as I can believe in a staff that's never coached my team before. That's how much I believe in them. I can't say that they have the confidence that I had in Nick Saban's staff. Also can't say that they have the doubt that I had in the Shula years or in the Dubose years, et cetera. So it's somewhere in between, but I lean closer to Saban years than I do those other ones.
I think you could make the case that DeBoer is inheriting a more talent-rich roster than the one he took over at Washington. And in 2 years there, he won 11 games in his first season, and then this past year went to the national championship game. The one difference, though, is I don't think Jalen Milroe is 1 season away from being a first-round quarterback. Now, full disclosure, I didn't see that with Michael Penix either, because I saw with Penix an injury history. I saw some inconsistencies. He had that amazing year at Indiana in the COVID season where the Indiana Hoosiers were in the top 15 nationally, and that's one of the things that you look at no matter where you are in the country, and you go, Indiana's where? Indiana's beating who? I don't care what the conditions are. That's incredible. And so that was kind of everybody's last impression of him. Everyone's last impression of Jalen Milroe was probably making the wrong read on the quarterback option, the power option there with the swing route on the fourth down play call against Michigan in the Rose Bowl there. But new offensive staff, DeBoer's at the helm. His track record with quarterbacks is very good. Now, Ryan Grubb has been there for large swaths of that, but it's not as if Kalen DeBoer is going to just, not be a part of the development of Jalen Milroe here. So how does he get the most out of Milroe going into this season?
Again, I think you just have to make sure that he's able to complete some of those intermediate to short passes. That was his problem a lot of time. He could improvise. When the play broke down, Jalen Milroe was great at improvisation. He could run around. I know one time specifically in the SEC title game, he was able to start running and then just sort of flick it right at the last second to a receiver to get a big first down. It was almost Bryce Young-like, but those were few and far between. And again, his running game is fantastic, but people are eventually going to force you to do something else. And the other problem Alabama had, obviously, was problems with the snaps and things last year. So, again, if that can get corrected, and I feel like it will, I think Alabama will be just fine. Now, there's also Ty Simpson there. They've also got Austin Mack, who's come in at 6'8", somewhere in that neighborhood. Young guy, but a lot of promise, and he can really sling it. I've seen some folks that talk to some folks that have been to practice, and they like what they see out of him so far. So I don't think Alabama is in peril if Jalen Milroe can't get it turned around, but I'm going to also say this. I think Jalen Milroe will get it turned around. I believe in Jalen Milroe as much as anybody because I've met him. I've spoken to him. This dude has his head on right. I think he just needs the right guy to get through to him. And hopefully Kalen DeBoer and this staff will be those guys to make that happen.
I'm curious how the marriage of Milroe's skill set and DeBoer's offense works this fall, because Milroe is a very mobile guy, not as if he can't make plays from the pocket. He loves a downfield shot. DeBoer loves a downfield shot as well, but DeBoer schemes his offenses for the plays to be made from the pocket. And sometimes I think with like Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, for instance, that can clash a little bit. I'm not saying it will. It's just something that I'm most definitely going to be watching for to see how he fits into that offense and what the offense looks like. Does he want Milroe to adapt to his scheme, or does he want to adapt a little bit more to what Milroe's skill set is? Real quick, which of those two do you feel like is more likely?
I feel like my philosophy is a good coach will adapt to what he has on the short term, and then long term recruit guys or train guys to be more like what he actually wants. I think on the short term for this particular year, and because it's not a rebuild, I think that he will adapt more to what Milroe can do versus trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Luke Robinson, Locked On Alabama, everything you need to know for spring football down in Tuscaloosa. Luke, thanks so much.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Is the Big 12 the most wide open conference? Vegas thinks so. I don't know if I agree. Before we get to the Big 12, this episode of Locked On College Football is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, which is like a super awesome price. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing a lot of hats and might not have the time or resources to hire, and 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Every single conference has a preseason championship odds team that is under plus 200. Except the Big 12. So Vegas is trying to tell you there is no big favorite out in the Big 12. I think Utah's being a little bit undervalued here, but the top two teams, according to our friends at FanDuel, are Utah and Kansas State at plus 340 and plus 360. Just for reference, the number one team in the SEC, according to FanDuel, is Georgia at plus 185. No surprise there. Ohio State in the Big 10 at plus 155. And actually, I misspoke a moment ago, so allow me to correct myself in real time as I record this show. The ACC has got a couple of teams at plus 280. That's Clemson and Florida State. But still, those odds are shorter than what you have in the Big 12. And I think that is very telling about what the odds makers think about that particular league. Now, I think that the ACC has got stronger teams at the top. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Louisville, NC State is to me a stronger top five than what you have over in the Big 12. Utah, Kansas State, Kansas, Arizona, and Texas Tech. But as you go down further, the depth in the Big 12, I think, outpaces what you have over in the ACC. The next team after NC State is SMU, who's making the G5 jump. Go ask BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF just how difficult that actually is to accomplish. Remember, SMU won the American Conference last year. Rhett Lashley's done a great job. They've got Preston Stone back at quarterback. Mustangs can make noise in the ACC. I don't know if they can contend, though, because that's an 11-2 team, or rather 11-3, because they lost their bowl game to Boston College, who was a middling team in the ACC, which is probably where SMU ends up being this year. But is this the most open conference in the country? Should it be over in the Big 12? No, I do not believe so. I think Utah should be a bigger favorite there. My reasoning is rather simple. Kansas State and Utah, I think we all agree. I hope we all agree. We probably don't, but that's okay. That Kansas and Utah State, excuse me, let me flip the states there. Kansas State and Utah are the two best teams in the Big 12 going into the season. I've got Avery Johnson as the quarterback for one team, and I've got Cam Rising as the other. Historically, 6th and 7th year quarterbacks, which Cam Rising is one of those too. He's been around college football for a mighty long time. I like that sort of advantage over an Avery Johnson. Now, is Chris Kleiman a good coach? Of course he is. He is a very good football coach, and I think Kansas State should have a good season. Their win total is quite high, as it should be. So too is Utah's. So I don't think it is destined that this conference produced these two teams in the championship game as much as the ACC. Because when you look at the ACC, Clemson, Florida State, and Miami, those are your top 3 odds market teams and to win the ACC championship. I believe it will be a combination of 2 of those 3. That is the most likely outcome to me. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if a Louisville, or I've talked about NC State a lot on this show, get into the mix. But I think that the roster talent, the coaching situations, the quarterback situations all line up the best at those 3 schools. In the Big 12, it's Kansas, Utah State, and then there's just a huge gap down to Kansas at plus 650. You've got Lance Leipold and Jalen Daniels back for another year over there with the Jayhawks. I mean, anytime you can give me coach and quarterback continuity, I am a fan. It's a hard thing to find in college football. It's one of the reasons I'm very high in Ole Miss in the SEC. There aren't that many teams returning their head coach and their starting quarterback from the prior year. So when you have that, I tend to think that continuity makes things easier to figure out, not harder. Doesn't mean other teams won't be good, but when it comes down to a Kansas State, I almost did it again, and Utah, I don't know why I want Kansas subconsciously to make the Big 12 championship game. FanDuel doesn't think it's out of the question. Plus 650, not the longest odds in the world. But Kansas State working in a new quarterback versus Utah having a supremely veteran quarterback there. I like the Utes in that particular spot should it come to pass. Now, as you keep going down in the Big 12, does this league continue to be fairly wide open? Yeah, because I don't think the gap between the teams kind of in the middle, the next 3, is as substantial as what you have in the ACC. Because the next 3 in the ACC are Louisville, NC State, and SMU. I don't think SMU has much of a chance. I think NC State does. Louisville could with Jeff Brom in their second year. They were in the game a season ago. NC State, I think, as I've talked about here on the show before, with Dave Doran, could be poised for their first 10-win season since he has been there. But in the Big 12, if you look at the fourth team is Arizona. I don't think this is the most open league in the entire conference. But do I think that these odds are an accurate depiction of where the conference championship picture sits? No, I do not. Because I think that Kansas, Arizona, and Texas Tech being plus 650, 750, and 850, I think those odds feel too long to me. They feel far too long. Now, why am I going between these two conferences? Because they're the most comparable. You're going to, as long as this structure continues to exist in college football, of the Power 2, the next 2, and then the Group 5, Big 12 and the ACC, naturally going to be compared many, many times. But Clemson is the favorite along with Florida State. Boy, oh boy. That's an interesting conundrum. So let's move to the ACC for a moment there and talk about those top 2 teams. There's a drop-off. There's a drop-off down to plus 450 at Miami with Mario Cristobal and company, who I think upgraded at quarterback this offseason in a pretty significant way, adding Cam Ward from Washington State. I think the playmaking ability and high-level throws that the Miami fans will see this year is going to be better than it was last year. I think Ward's got a little bit more of a mobility to him. Tyler Van Dyke is a fine, capable quarterback. He'll go up to Wisconsin this year, and the Badgers will be just fine. He'll be solid up there at a place like Miami where they want to run the football first, historically speaking. So Florida State and Clemson. DJ Uiagalelei is the quarterback at Florida State. In case everybody forgot, Cade Klubnik back for another year with the Clemson Tigers. And so for Clemson, you have that returning dynamic that I love so much of head coach and quarterback, and you've got a great and proven offensive coordinator. That spells big leap, That spells progress. Last year was the first full season in which Cade Klubnik had the reins. DJ Uiagalelei transfers out. It's Cade Klubnik's team for the first time, has his ups and downs. This is now year 3 for Cade Klubnik in college football. Highly touted recruit. He's going to have everything that he needs. He's got a head coach who's obviously going to support him, but not in every single way, as I'll get to in a moment. And you have an offensive coordinator who we know is very good. He was one of the architects behind TCU making the national championship game. And he left, so did a lot of players, and the Horned Frogs missed a bowl game. I don't think Sonny Dykes is a terrible coach. In fact, I know for a fact that he is not given his track record. But I just wonder if Garrett Riley and Cade Klubnik can't find that secret sauce, that special formula, the right way to make it happen over there in Clemson. But the question is whether or not their roster is going to be as good as it needs to be. This is a school with a head coach in Dabo Swinney that certainly recruits well. You go look at Clemson's recruiting classes. They're not bad. They're not scraping the bottom of the barrel. They're not inching just to get, a top 30 or 40 class here and there. No, they can recruit. But they just have this stubborn refusal to bring kids in via the portal because it's all about the program and the culture and the identity. We'll see if that plays itself out. Because Clemson just had an 8-4 regular season, won their bowl game against Kentucky to end the year 9-4. But that's the worst regular season Dabo Swinney has had there as the head coach in, shall we say, a very long time. Kids have been born and grown up in which they haven't seen Clemson win that many games, and they'll be, fans again this year with Dabo Swinney as the head coach. So that's going to continue to be the question in the ongoing evaluation of Dabo Swinney as the head coach at Clemson. And I think it's a fascinating year. I think it is a fascinating year for what they can do. And then conversely, you've got a little bit of a nomad in DJ Uiagalelei. Mike Norvell got a big extension in the offseason. It's the most ticked off program in all of college football because they didn't get the chance, Florida State that is, to get blown out in the playoff this past year. But does that give them that sort of edge? Yeah, I think so. At some level, Mike Norvell is going to incorporate that into the program and into the culture down there in Tallahassee. And at some point in time, I think that's just good for you. I think that can work to infect in the best way possible every player in your locker room. And that's why I can't see both of those teams missing the conference championship game. One of them, sure. I can absolutely see it. But both, don't think so. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.